Hello, Esther Gidhu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo residents scramble for food and safety as conflict intensifies. The ongoing Sudan crisis displaces thousands and leaves millions facing increasing hunger and malnutrition. And on a positive note, the Guinea-worm disease is on the verge of eradication, with only 13 provisional human cases of the disease reported worldwide in 2023. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
Residents in the Democratic Republic of Congo's city of Goma are depending on scant food supplies brought in via canoe after fighting in the country's east between the army and rebels cut off supply routes. David Doyle explains.
This is the small market of Kituku on the banks of Democratic Republic of Congo's Lake Kivu. It's now a crucial source of food for over 2 million people, including those who fled violence in the country's east. That's after an intensifying conflict between the army and rebels disrupted supplies to the eastern city of Goma. Roads have been cut off, leaving people like Banana seller Esperance Nyota dependent on the scant supplies arriving in Kituku via canoes. She fears an impending famine if the situation persists.
The country's authorities must do everything in their power to end the war. It's sure that after the war everything will be fine. They must do everything to end this war.
Clashes in towns and villages around the provincial capital have escalated since the start of the year. As the M23 rebel group has seized territory, thousands have sought refuge in Goma. Around 135,000 have fled the town of Sake in the past week, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. They join hundreds of thousands displaced around Goma since 2022, due to the ongoing fighting. The UN agency has warned that the conflict, including indiscriminate bombing, risks exacerbating the strain on already limited resources to cater for the influx. Akili Mali Kasalemba was injured by bomb shrapnel while fleeing his village.
We were many. 7 of us died on the spot, and many others were injured. It was like this during the escape. The bombs fell on us. Some died and others survived.
Protesters marched in Goma on Monday against the resurgent rebels. Congo's government, UN officials and Western powers have accused Rwanda of supporting M23, which claims to defend ethnic Tutsi interests against Hutu militias, whose leaders participated in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Rwanda has refuted the allegations.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. The World Food Programme is warning that the ongoing crisis in Sudan is causing thousands of families to be displaced to Chad and South Sudan weekly, and at least 25 million people facing increasing hunger and malnutrition. The 10-month war between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces is devastating the country's infrastructure. Hunger and acute malnutrition are soaring, and according to WFP, there are 18 million acutely food insecure people within the country and around 3.8 million Sudanese children under 5 years old that are malnourished. A 27-year-old mother, Mahida Ibrahim, told the WFP she and her family fled Sudan and traveled 2 days by bus to reach the transit center on the South Sudan border looking for food and shelter.
The rates of malnutrition are high. We are finding that the most impacted are the women and children, and that's why a range of services are available at the border immediately when they cross in, but also when they're moved to the transit center.
People, as you see, arrive with very little, if anything at all. They're being registered, they're being given basic support, and then they're being asked to move further into South Sudan. People are leaving Sudan, fleeing Sudan because of the war, because of the conflict, and they're ending up here where WFP and other agencies are providing basic support but it's an extraordinarily challenging circumstance.
The WFP says most people are trapped in areas of active fighting where aid agencies are struggling to maintain consistent access. South Africa on Tuesday urged the International Court of Justice in The Hague to issue a non-binding legal opinion that the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal. South Africa argues that it would help its effort to reach a settlement. The hearing follows a request by the United Nations General Assembly for an advisory opinion on the occupation in 2022. More than 50 states will present arguments until February 26th. Palestinian representatives on Monday asked the court to declare Israel's occupation of their territory illegal, also saying the court's advisory opinion could contribute to a two-state solution and a lasting peace.
The inordinate delay in achieving a fair and just settlement has resulted in an unending cycle of violence. A clear legal characterization of the nature of Israel's regime over the Palestinian people can only assist in remedying the ongoing delay in achieving a just settlement.
Israel is not attending the hearings but sent a written statement saying an advisory opinion would be harmful to achieving a negotiated settlement with Palestinians. Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, is asking the European Union not to recognize Russia's March election, which is almost certain to give President Vladimir Putin another 6-year term. Navalnaya is calling on supporters to oppose Putin with greater fury than ever and free Russia from what she characterized as a corrupt elite of, quote, bandits in uniform, thieves and murderers. For more on Russia's politics, I'm joined by Alex Janeski, a VOA Russian language journalist. Alex, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi, Esther, how are you?
First of all, we want to know, do we know for certain at this point what killed Navalny?
We do not. The official version that Navalny died from the sudden death. What we have seen based on the Russian government reports is that the clot broke off and that's what caused his death. But there is also important to say that Russia denied an independent autopsy of Navalny.
Now, we know that Yulia has said she's going to continue the work that her late husband was doing. Can she fill the gap that her husband left, and as a fierce critic of President Vladimir Putin?
Technically, she could. The problem is that with the Russian opposition, what we have seen, it is being divided. So they have not come up with something in common. And let's not forget that despite Ms. Tikhanovskaya in Belarus, who was one of the presidential candidates, unfortunately, Ms. Navalnaya, at this moment, she does not have any legitimacy within Russia. She is a widow of Alexei Navalny, but some of the experts are saying that she's supposed to take his flag and keep carrying on.
Where is she now? Is she still in Germany? Is she still in Russia? Where is she? What we have seen, she has been traveling to get her husband's body, and we will see how this whole situation develops and unfolds. You mentioned that Russia's opposition is kind of divided, but the ones that are still really known to be in the opposition, what kind of strategy do they have to continue fighting for a free and democratic Russia?
Unfortunately, it is hard to say because some of the Russian opposition leaders are being jailed, like Vladimir Kara-Murza or Mr. Yashin, and another one are being outcasted to the West, the United States or Europe. And let's not forget that it is that the Russian government cracked down on the opposition leaders and general on opposition moves. And one of the proofs is that you can't even go and put flowers to commemorate Navalny's death because you will be arrested or you will be beaten or you will be sentenced to 15 days in the prison.
Generally, how do Russians view Vladimir Putin?
Generally speaking, right, it looks like the Russians do like Vladimir Putin. There is a very small amount of Russians, what we have seen, opposing. And the grounds to say that is how the Russians are perceiving the war in Ukraine. And that they still going to fight against Ukraine. And unfortunately, that's what we see.
And what is that view of the war in Ukraine? Are they for it? Are they against it? Are they divided about it? What's their position?
Generally speaking, the Russian society is being divided. The people who were against the war, they left Russia en masse. We saw it. And unfortunately, some of the Russians are still supporting Putin and his unprovoked and unjust war against Ukraine.
Alex, thank you very much for your insight on what's happening in Russia. It was great to have you in the studio today.
Thank you.
Alex Janeski is a journalist with VOA's Russian language service. The British government has introduced the Safety of Rwanda Asylum and Immigration Bill, which is designed to streamline the process of removing asylum seekers to Rwanda. However, this move is being criticized by UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, who warns that it goes against the basic principles of the rule of law and could lead to a severe blow to human rights. One of the bill's main features is requiring all decision makers, including government ministers, immigration officers, and courts or tribunals reviewing asylum decisions, to treat Rwanda as a safe country for refugees and asylum seekers, regardless of evidence. This could potentially put the safety of vulnerable individuals at risk.
Independent, effective judicial oversight is the bedrock of the rule of law. It must be respected and strengthened. Governments can't revoke their international human rights and asylum-related obligations by legislation. We urge the UK government to take all necessary steps to ensure full compliance with the UK's international legal obligations and to uphold the country's proud history of effective, independent judicial scrutiny. Such a stance is today more vital than ever.
More than 1,000 asylum seekers have arrived in Britain on small boats so far this year, according to Reuters. Liberian refugee Fanbule Gaikala Zaza shares his remarkable journey from escaping the civil war in Monrovia to the challenges he faces as an immigrant in the United States. VOA's Lisa Vora reports that despite everything, he finds stability, success, and gratitude in his new home.
Back home in Liberia, soccer was the one thing that brought everyone together.
What's up, man?
It was about May 1990. At that point, the rebels haven't arrived in Monrovia yet. There was in the outskirts of Monrovia. We were fortunate to be one of the few family that could afford escaping at that point. So we went to Sierra Leone. We arrived in Freetown, and we live in a hotel.
Yo, what's up, Zaza? What's up, man?
For the first 3 months or so, we live a similar life like we did back in Liberia, where we had maid in the hotel with us. We had food, and everything seems to be fine. With the understanding that once the rebel get to Monrovia, everything will subside, and pretty soon we'll return back home, because it was our first civil war and we didn't quite understand the impact or the magnitude of a civil war. My family ran out of money and we had to relocate. So at that point I was 11 years old. So we had to fend for ourselves. So one thing that my mother did was have a cell in the streets of Sierra Leone. As with any human being, your first thinking is, I need to get something to eat. How do I get something to eat? At this point I have to sell to get something to eat. So you don't think that just a few months ago I had everything and I could afford everything. At this point, you're thinking that I have to sell to eat, so you essentially disregard the past and continue to move forward, because at that point, you just put yourself within survival mode.
When I first came to the United States, this was in the 90s, and these kids weren't used to anything that wasn't purely American attire. So we got made fun of a lot for what we wore, how we spoke. And then even worse, because when we cook in our house, we cook with a lot of spices. So as you can imagine, if you live in a small apartment with a lot of people, your clothes will always smell like the food and smell like spices.
Hi, how was soccer? Hi.
I'm married with 2 kids, live in the suburb of Virginia.
Did your team win? Did your team win?
Yeah, we won 3-0.
Yeah!
And what advice I would have for them? I think it goes beyond them, right? What advice I would have for any young person is work hard, have integrity, and build good relationships. You need to have those 3 things as your anchor in this life.
You want the whole thing?
The United States, as much problem we have, I think it's still one of the greatest country or the greatest country in the world where you can come from nowhere, work very, very hard, regardless of your situation, right? And you dedicate yourself and you are honest, you do well.
That's true.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, eradicating Guinea-worm disease. We'll have an update on our health reports. Stay with us.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, the 37th summit of the African Union gathered regional and world leaders in Ethiopia at a time when parts of the continent have experienced multiple coups and growing instability. The summit also addressed the need to build resilient education systems accessible to all. Join me, Heidi Adams, for a discussion on the role and significance of the African Union in building a stronger continent.
In other news, Guinea's ruling junta led by Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya is ordering government members' passports to be seized and their bank accounts frozen after dissolving the administration by decree on Monday. In addition, government members' service vehicles, bodyguards and assistants are being removed, according to the Chief of Staff General Ibrahima Sori Bangura. The trial for Egyptian security agents accused of kidnapping and killing of Giulio Regeni, a postgraduate at Britain's Cambridge University, who disappeared in Cairo in January 2016, opened in Italy Tuesday, but Italian prosecutors have been unable to track down the 4 Egyptians to issue summons. As a result, they are being tried in absentia. And the Democratic Republic of Congo state miner Gécamines is broadening a push to extract more from its copper and cobalt joint ventures, seeking to negotiate for higher stakes across the board to gain leverage in management of some of the biggest mines. The company says it wants more local executives on boards governing joint ventures to have a greater say in how assets are managed. The United Nations says packaging is one of the biggest drivers of the world's plastic pollution problem. To address the issue, a Kenyan company is making toxic, chemical-free, compostable food packaging products from agricultural waste. Juma Majanga reports.
At an industrial area on the outskirts of Thika town in central Kenya, Anita Shah is supervising the manufacture of biodegradable food packaging containers. Shah says she was frustrated by the amount of packaging plastic she saw whenever she went shopping in supermarkets. In 2011, the development economist left her 2-decade-long international career and returned home to set up Green Products, a company that manufactures toxic chemical-free compostable packaging products from agricultural waste. Shah says she wants to protect the environment and fight climate change.
Essentially, we want to do is eliminate plastic from the food system where possible, so that the question of production of plastics and the fossil fuels used in the production of plastics and the CO2 emissions that result from the manufacturing process of plastic and the burning of it and disposal in landfill is eliminated.
The company currently uses sugarcane waste, called bagasse, as raw material, but says other plant byproducts can be used as well. The bagasse is pulped into slurry, which is then pressed into desired shapes before being trimmed and sprayed with a waterproofing bio-based solvent and dried. The result is a range of biodegradable packaging containers that David Mwangan, a machine operator at Green Products, say are good alternatives to plastic.
Even in my home right now, I don't like plastic because when you follow up with the plastic, what you get after after disposing this plastic to the environment. It's not good. Yeah. But what we are making now, even if we just grow it to the farm, it will lot after some months.
According to the United Nations, the world produces roughly 430 million tons of plastic every year, but less than 9% of this is recycled. African countries are particularly vulnerable to the negative effects of plastic pollution because the recycling sector on the continent is just starting out. Experts say innovators like Greenstep can play a key role going forward.
Innovation and technology-led innovation is really, I would say, the main thing to unlock how the 21st century will disrupt the 20th century businesses and end up with a much cleaner planet and even more jobs as well.
Greenstep says it currently produces 100,000 pieces of packaging products per month and is installing new machinery that will see the numbers rise to 2.4 million pieces per month. Greenstep products are slightly more expensive than plastic alternatives, but half the cost of imported versions. Shah says,
we're about planet, people and profit, so self-sufficiency, but ultimately our goal is to conserve the planet.
Packaging makes up approximately 36% of all plastic produced in the world, making it a big driver of plastic pollution, according to the UN Environment Agency. Entrepreneurs like Shah hope their innovations can at least be part of the solution. Juma Majanga, VOA News, Thika, Kenya.
It's time for Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on Guinea-worm eradication. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Dracunculiasis, or Guinea-worm disease, is on the verge of eradication. According to the Carter Center, only 13 provisional human cases of the disease were reported worldwide in 2023. Dracunculiasis is a crippling, parasitic, neglected tropical disease transmitted mostly when people drink stagnant water contaminated with parasite-infected water fleas. The disease is rarely fatal, but infected people become non-functional for weeks and months. For more insight, I'm joined by Adam Wise, director of the Guinea-worm eradication program at the Carter Center in Atlanta. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So Guinea-worm is a neglected tropical disease. Tell us about the impact of this specific disease, because NTDs are a group of diseases, but talk to us about Guinea-worm and how it has been a public health problem.
So you characterized it very well, that you get infected when you drink contaminated water. So somebody or an animal infects a water source, and most people in this world happen to drink from stagnant water. And so you pick up the infection. A year later, that worm will emerge from your body. And it's not just any worm. It's a 1 meter long worm that looks similar to a piece of spaghetti. And this worm emerges through a painful blister, and it can take about 4 to 6 weeks to remove. There's lots of pain, fever. You're unable to go to work, to school. A woman in South Sudan even mentioned that it's worse than childbirth. And of course, most stoic men will even be brought to tears because of the pain.
Wow.
As you're aware, in 1986, there were an estimated 3.5 million people with the disease each year, and that was impacting tens of thousands of communities. And most of the time, those communities were very remote, beyond the reach of their national health systems. And the Guinea-worm program has really helped to bridge those gaps.
So, Adam, last year, 13 cases were reported. Where do we stand now in terms of eradication? Because it's been a while, we've been hearing that it's on the brink of eradication. Carter Center have released a report on it. Where do we stand, and what are the remaining challenges?
So we are just at 13 human cases last year, and we expect to have less than that in 2024. That's across countries like Chad, South Sudan, Cameroon, and Mali. And on a planet of 8 billion people, certainly that's a historic feat. But really, that's all because of the ownership at the community level, which is led by community volunteers. And they engage their fellow community members on a number of different interventions to stop transmission. And we are at that proverbial last mile or last kilometer, but we also know the end game of eliminating a disease from the world, eradicating it, is a difficult challenge. And so there's kind of 4 key challenges that I'd highlight. One is we don't have a vaccine or therapeutic. So we don't have a tool like polio or other diseases have to help stop transmission. We don't have diagnostics. And the program is, has made so much success and so much impact, from 3.5 million people in the mid-1980s to only 13 last year, that it becomes a lower priority when countries already have strained health systems with very limited resources. And the last one is that we have seen in recent years the occurrence of guinea worm in domestic dogs and domestic cats, where we had not seen infections in a meaningful way in the past. And so a guinea worm in any host needs to be dealt with, or it can come back into the human population. And so getting to eradication also helps protect the human population in the long term.
And speaking of long-term, so beyond eradication, immediately, what are the long-term strategies for surveillance to ensure that guinea worm does not reemerge in communities that have been successful in combating it?
Well, once we get to 0, then we can rest assured that it will not resurge. But you rightfully pointed out, surveillance is critical. So right now, the global program supports more than 10,000 communities in the endemic countries, with a workforce of more than 30,000 men and women volunteers that are helping to prevent future outbreaks. But those are really the bedrock of the surveillance system. And so as we move forward, making sure that surveillance is integrated at a national level, which is already done by ministries of health, but then also encouraging people to come forward if they have signs or symptoms of the disease. So if you think about the smallpox eradication program, they had a global cash reward at the end game. And that's likely something that the global guinea worm eradication program will also employ to help make sure that there are no infections.
Great, Adam. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, too.
Adam Weiss is the director of the Guinea-worm eradication program at the Carter Center in Atlanta. That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X at Linor Moudou. Esther, back to you.
Thanks, Lino. Be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at viewafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.